James, do you contact the subject of your videos ever to get like their side of the story or defense?
Yeah, it's complicated when I do that. I have considered it for certain things, and there have been times when I thought, well, maybe I should have done that.
Hmm.
Often I just tend to try and present a perspective from the public eye, kind of like what we know. I try not to spring too many surprises, like, oh, look, I spoke with this X and Y. Though I have done that occasionally. I feel like uh I feel more comfortable coming in from just as much as the audience can possibly know in a way, because it becomes quite complicated when you begin to involve the subject of the video. You risk uh in slanting the perspective, and if you're not considering all the other subjects that may be involved, because when you deal with these dramas, you'll realize that actually it's more than just a person. Even if there is an individual who is the focus of a video, there'll be multiple other people involved in the story. If you're not necessarily involving them, then you're probably not getting the whole thing either. It's impossible to ever get the full picture with these things. So what I try and do is typically go with what the public what I can publicly find, because a lot of people probably don't have the same research techniques as me, and probably don't want to have to go and do that to find that information. So what I can say is, okay, here's what people are saying, and here's what information we have on the issue, and here's my opinion. I try not to necessarily integrate the personal subject too much, because I think can actually complicate things rather than make it clearer, particularly if it's like someone who may not necessarily represent themselves with the best of intentions. I think I have considered doing live interviews with a
Hmm.
couple people who I thought would be interesting to discuss, because then you can kind of have your evidence there, and you can go, here's what I have, and you can hit them with this information, and they can respond how they feel comfortable in that moment.
That's a
But
really impressive skill set if you
it's
do it well. Like, so I watch a lot of politics, right? And
yeah,
typically the politician will say something. It takes an uber well informed interviewer to say, like, to call bullshit on something that's untrue.
yes,
And
definitely.
you know, and you'd be interviewing people about themselves, an area where they almost have to have more subject matter expertise than you. It would be
Yeah,
hard to
and
do
that's
well.
that's in a way why I've kind of been a bit tentative to do it. I had an idea of how I would approach certain things, and I feel like I could push certain individuals into awkward positions where they'd
Hmm.
have trouble justifying themselves, given what I found in the past. But at the same time, it also could go south fairly easily, and I'm quite happy making the content that I'm making right now, and
Yeah,
and
I wonder if you came into it and three out of four things you thought were true, but he has you on one where you made a mistake. Do you win or
yeah,
lose that? I don't even know.
I know it's difficult because it depends on the, I guess, gravity of each individual situation, and how it forms a larger portrait of the character in question. And so if you have three fairly solid points, but one point is pretty essential to the argument that you're making, then you could easily lose that.
Right? Or he tries to make it about the least important thing because that's the one where
Exactly.
you're wrong. Yeah.
And that's the other problem with interviews. It's not necessarily about the truth in a way. It's sometimes just about who performs best in the moment. And I have good days, I have very bad days, and some days I'll just be absolutely fried. My brain will just not be in the mood. And you kind of have to be switched on for interviews. I'm happy to sit down and do a podcast and just chat shit for however many hours, but when it's an interview, you need to be on the ball consistently,
Mhm.
and I feel I need to create my own time for that, and I prefer to do that, maybe as something to consider down the line rather than combined with the current brand of content that I'm making.
Yeah, and I'm thinking some of the subjects you'd be talking to would be tough, right? You get a guy with a lot of
without-
like live streaming experience.
Mhm.
That guy's got a lot of time on a mic. You know, he's going to compose himself pretty well.
Oh yeah, and I'm not really out to hammer people with my content typically. Sure, there's the odd person here and there that I really have a strong distaste for, but a lot of the people I don't really have that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And an interview probably wouldn't be the most vital thing to help the situation. And the people who I actively dislike, then it becomes complicated, because if I've decided that someone is a rather sinister being, then I must consider how they would approach an interview and how they may not act with the best faith. And there's been questions before about how some people are attention seeking, and well, if you give them an interview, what are you giving them? You really want to make sure that you have those people kind of dead to rights on your points as much as they have their points down as well. And being spontaneous is a necessity in interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to think on your feet, because if soon as that person throws a curveball towards you, which they may well do, and you're not ready, then it will make you look bad, perhaps make
Yeah.
you look may hemorrhage credibility. And therefore, for me, it's nice to have videos where I can kind of just create a timeline of situations as people see them transpire, and not necessarily worry too much about trying to get a guy down to his rights and expose him good and proper, because I think at that point it would not just be a lot of personal stress for me. It would probably not necessarily be the best in revealing the truth, because there's a lot of factors that come into interviews and so on that tend to cloud, I guess, the outcome. And you don't necessarily I haven't watched an interview and necessarily ever felt truly convinced by a person from a certain interview alone.
Yeah, I get that. I've seen a lot of interviews with I'm into true crime a lot, and I've seen a lot
likewise.
I've seen a lot of interviews with like who's an example, like Manson. You know, they did so many with him while he was alive, and every single interview I would watch, I just kept thinking in the back of my mind, like, this isn't an unbiased look at the dude. This is like the television company milking this guy for ratings. You know what I mean? Their interview is designed to make him look bad. Their interview is designed to paint him as like crazy. Their interview is designed to like milk him as a living, I guess, Satan in a way, you know? So I get what you're saying in that regard, where it's like, if you do these interviews, you can come away with a different perspective, or you might present your questions. Like if you dislike somebody, you're not giving them maybe the full truth just because you don't like them. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be biased in that regard. So yeah, I totally get that.
That's interesting. I came at it from the other direction. I was worried that monsters who were well practiced in explaining away their transgressions would somehow, like, I'm trying to say, win the interview, you know?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very easy for... I figured that was coming.
You know, you might have saw that coming. I did not see that coming.
I just...
That was pretty good.
I just saw the green square around the video, and I was like, oh gosh, here comes trouble.
I was really into the topic, so I was just like,
sorry.
Oh yeah, and I'm like, is my headset breaking? What is that?
No, that's Australian culture. Sorry.
You're appropriating it.
I think that there are many ways that interviews can just go terribly wrong.
Did we